Okay, we're now live, thank you. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Communities and Partnerships Committee on the 4th of March, 2021. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Members, you are by now aware of the need to keep your video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting. Please click the raised hand function. There's a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. And the public broadcast will be paused. If it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Can I remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded? Thank you. So we'll move on to item 1. Apologies for absence and declarations of interest. So I have apologies from Councillor Smith, and welcome back Councillor Wells, who's substituting for her. Do we have any other apologies, Nick? There's no other apologies that I'm aware of. So I'll begin by calling the names of all those members of the committee to establish your presence for the record. So please indicate that you're present. Councillor Ashwood.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Ashwood.
Sorry, I'm having problems here, obviously.
Able to respond? Councillor Batchelor.
Present.
We obviously have technical. Thank you. We're having technical problems here, obviously. So, okay, thank you. Councillor Batchelor.
He's frozen as well.
It's Councillor Batchelor I'm asking for.
Yeah, present, Chair. Sorry, I dropped out for a second. Yeah, present, Chair, if you can hear me.
Okay, Councillor Costello.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Costello.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Every.
Present.
Thank you. Is that Councillor Every?
Yes, I said present, Chair, sorry.
So thank you.
That's
Councillor
all.
French.
Present.
Councillor Machini.
Present.
Councillor Nieto. Not here yet. Hopefully she'll join us shortly. Councillor Sanderson. Not here yet. Hopefully he'll join us shortly. Councillor Wells.
Present.
And myself, Councillor Criswell. So, sorry, hopefully things will improve. We're a bit disrupted at the moment with the IT, so we'll persevere and hopefully it'll improve. We move on to item 2, which is minutes of the last meeting received on the 21st of January. We're being asked to approve the minutes. Are a correct record. Please can I ask members to indicate if they disagree or have any comments they wish to make. Nobody indicating. Thank you very much. So we'll take those minutes as approved and move on to item 2B, the action log. Adrian, would you like to just update us on anything from the action log, please?
Yeah, with pleasure. Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. There is only one outstanding action on the log. That's action 335 on page 3. And when I run through the Service Director report for this month, I'll be inviting, with your agreement, Chair, Matt Oliver to update us on that outstanding action.
Thank you. Sorry, members, I'm just reading an email from Councillor Nieto. Councillor Nieto can't get in. Adrian, she's asked for you to send her a link to her personal email. Would you be able to do that, please?
I will, Chair.
She's copied you into the email. So any items on the action log, members? Nobody showing. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Adrian, for that update. So item 3, petitions and public questions. None have been received. So we'll move on to item 4, which is the recommissioning of Cambridgeshire Local Assistance Scheme. And to present the report, we have Helen Andrews, who's the Children and Families Commissioning Manager. Welcome, Helen. Over to you to present the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good morning. This paper is about the recommissioning of Cambridgeshire Local Assistance Scheme, often referred to as CLASS. And if you don't mind, I will use this abbreviation as I highlight some of the key points in this paper.
Of course.
CLASS is CLASS is a contracted service. It provides a frontline safety net to families facing unexpected financial difficulties and hardship. CLASS provides help with practical support and assistance. It includes personal budgeting support, benefit and debt advice. CLASS also awards grants for supermarket vouchers, recycled goods and white goods to eligible families. The CLASS contract ends in just over 1 year's time on the 31st of March 2022. This means we need to use this time to procure a new service. Paragraph 1.3 and 1.4 set out some of the figures on the number of households supported by CLASS over the last 3 years of the contract, and show how the CLASS model reaches families in crisis by working with CLASS champions, Citizens Advice Bureau and Money Advice Services. Paragraphs 1.5 and 1.6 highlight the issues of demand and illustrate the impact that COVID has had on CLASS. So, for example, requests for support tripled in the first lockdown as many people were furloughed and struggled to make ends meet while they waited for universal credit payments. CLASS saw a 66% increase compared to the same period in the previous year. Referrals for supermarket vouchers increased 178% and have remained consistently high ever since. The increase in demand for CLASS support has put a huge strain on the CLASS budget. The Council approved an additional £132,000 of funding and more recently, CLASS are helping with the distribution of the Winter COVID grant to families and children. CLASS also looks for ways to stretch the budget to meet demand, most notably working closely with local charities such as Cambridge Aid, John Huntington's Charity and Cottenham Charity to spread the burden of supporting this volume of hardship. In addition to this, CLASS and the charities networks are working together to help alleviate some of the financial stresses by sharing intelligence, coordinating their work, problem solving and supporting each other. To monetize the value of CLASS through a cost benefit analysis, CLASS applies the New Economy Unit cost database to identify costs avoided to the public purse. Paragraphs 1.7 show in the last 3 years, CLASS has delivered at least 1.4 million of costs avoided to the County Council. The recommissioning of CLASS is to enter a contract arrangement for an initial 3 years with an option to extend for a further 2-year period. The value of this 5-year contract would be 1.5 million, which is in excess of the £500,000 procurement threshold. Communities and partnership committees therefore asked to delegate authority to award the funding at the point of award. Recommissioning of CLASS offers an opportunity for market engagement to seek the views of a wide range of stakeholders as well as providers. Commissioners are consulting local charities, district councils, housing needs teams, think community place coordinators, and people with lived experience to better understand needs and evidence of what works. In terms of procuring a new service, paragraph 1.11 outlines key procurement timelines. The final service specification will be ready in July 21 this year, with a tender going live at the beginning of August. The contract will be awarded in late November, with mobilisation in the January 22, so that the new service is in place and starts on the 1st of April 2022. I've already mentioned in sections 1.5 and 1.6 the issues of keeping up with demand for support. In section 2 on main issues, this looks at some of the analysis coming out locally and nationally on the economic impact of COVID restrictions and the likely prolonged financial difficulties that will continue for many of our Cambridgeshire families. This will put further pressure on CLAS for some time. In section 3, I would just highlight 3.2 and 3.3, the qualitative driven insights, learning and work to support community-led solutions that CLAS has shown us. Thank you. This paper is seeking your agreement on the recommissioning of Cambridgeshire's local assistance scheme.
Thank you, Helen. So very important contract, members, never more so demonstrated, obviously, recently during the pandemic and ongoing recovery. So do we have any questions or comments, please, from members? Looks if it's all been self-explanatory. Anybody indicating at all? David, you're waving. Are members able to use the raise hand function, or you perhaps not, David? So go ahead, David.
Apologies, I couldn't find it quick enough. Okay. It looks very good from reading it, and I'm not that familiar with it. As I understand it, there's a budget each year of about 300,000, and we give about 130,000 in grants, and then the advice and things. Presumably the rest of the money is on advice and things like a bit of admin and that. Is it possible to give us an indication of where the other, I guess, 170,000 goes to, and where you're looking for it to go to in looking at the recommissioning?
Yes, I mentioned that CLAS works with citizens advice bureaus. That is a subcontracting arrangement that is funded. The actual administration costs is just under 10% of the total contract value. The rest of it does actually go, the CLAS champions, for example, receive honorariums. They are part of other agencies and organisations, so they have the outreach, so there is an honorarium system. Quite often what CLAS has reported is that sometimes they actually give up their honorarium so that they can be used directly to support families.
So some of the money is available to react to need then, Helen, rather than have definite. Yes, okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much. Just to say welcome, Councillor Nieto. I know we had technical problems this morning, so please you joined us. Thank you very much. Any other points or questions, members? If not, we'll move to the recommendations. Thank you very much, Helen. So members, we're being asked to agree the recommendations of procurement of Cambridgeshire Local Assistance Scheme and to delegate authority to the Executive Director of People and Commissioning and Communities to commit the funding at the time of the award of the contract. So if you're anybody objecting, please show, members. Otherwise, we're Elisa.
Sorry, I'm not objecting, but I do have a slightly odd question. I was wondering if we're agreeing, because we have a separate recommendation for allowing the executive director to sort of take the money, but I was kind of wondering why it needed a separate recommendation if we're agreeing the funding today.
Because it won't be made until the time the contract is let, Elisa, so it just gives that delegated authority. We don't know who will win the contract yet, but when it's finalised. Adrian, do you want to elaborate on that at all? But
no, you're quite correct. So effectively, we're seeking permission today to begin the recommissioning procurement process. At the point when the bids come in, we will then following the normal tendering exercise and panel decisions, a formal decision is then needed to actually award the contract based on those tenders. And that's the part that we're asking to be delegated to the executive director. So effectively, she will operate within the confines of the decision made today, but we'll make that final contract award.
I see. That's absolutely fine.
Anything to do that, would we? So, no. Okay. Happy with that, Lisa?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So back to the recommendations, everyone. Is everyone happy? Please show if not. Great, nobody showing. So we'll take those as approved. Thank you very much. Thank you, Helen. And move on to item 5, which is the report of the Service Director for Communities and Partnerships. Adrian's monthly report, which we all find very useful. So thank you, Adrian, over to you.
Thank you. No pressure. Really great to bring you the latest Service Director report. As is now tradition, it's split into 2 halves. The first half is the service updates, our kind of business as usual work, or highlights anyway. And then the second half is the COVID response update. So I'll just pick out some of the key headlines from each of the sections, if I may. 2.2.1, the Cambridgeshire local work continues to gather real pace. Matt Oliver, who you all know, is on the call today and has now got almost a full team of staff, which is fantastic. And I think really starting to motor district by district, some incredible relationships, as you know, that have been formed and strengthened over the last year, and all being really positively exploited to support the rollout of our social mobility agenda. And I'll talk more about that in the social mobility item. There were just a couple of things I wanted to point out in section 221. At point 6, I just wanted to explain that we have agreed to extend the procurement deadline for the contract to award voluntary sector infrastructure support funding. That's because the very organisations that are likely to bid for that are so at the moment occupied with delivering COVID response that they were really struggling to spend time building and developing a quality bid. And obviously we want as many local contracts as possible to be delivered to local organisations, and therefore cut them out some time and space to spend a bit more time developing their submission. So we've extended that until the beginning of April, so just by a couple of months, and duly extended the existing contract. So I hope that's acceptable. At point 7, on the really successful County Council Community Capital project, we were due to bring a full report to this meeting. As explained in the report, again, COVID, as is often the way at the moment, has impacted somewhat on the pace of delivery for some projects, not all. So we're asking for that report to be deferred to our next meeting. But there is a short update in that paragraph. No risks at all to the programme, no red flags, I'm pleased to say, just a delay caused by repeated lockdowns and availability of builders and so on. And at point 8, I just wanted to refer here to the point that the Cambridgeshire local team, as will be articulated in the next item, are wholly focused now towards spending their work and leading the way across our organisation and our partnership to tackling social immobility across the county. So that, following the workshop we held last month, has become their primary raison d'etre. Really, really exciting prospect. 2.2.2 in the community safety section, I just wanted to make some provide some further details on work that's happened since the report was drafted. At point 2 there, I refer to some new funding that has been announced by government to support upper tier councils as well as lower tier councils to a lesser extent to deliver the new Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Act, if it's enacted in April. That enactment is still going through Parliament, due to be enacted and come into effect from April. Provisional funding of £1.1 million has been announced for Cambridgeshire County Council to support the delivery of that. And as a brief reminder, the primary focus of that act is to ensure that we are providing suitable and safe accommodation for victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. It's a really incredible and welcome injection of investment to support that work. And we're in a good place, actually, I think, in Cambridgeshire, in that we've already got lots of really good quality commission support services, refugees and other support services for victims. But that funding will really help to embed the principles of the Act. I also just wanted to say something about the role of the County Council's community safety responsibility here in the context of social mobility. Traditionally, as you all know, community safety responsibility rests largely with district and city councils through the community safety partnerships. But we, for some time, have held a view that we need to support those CSPs, those community safety partnerships, and probably never more so than now as communities start to recover from the pandemic. And I think one of the big roles for community safety, County Council community safety services, is to support the physical appearance of a place. We call it the broken window theory. It's referenced in section 4 of the community safety section of the report. And I think there's a really vital role for us to play in getting alongside our district colleagues, voluntary agencies and residents to make sure that the place they live in and work in feels safe, isn't blighted by fly tipping and graffiti and broken windows, because the logic says and research shows that once that starts, people begin to feel themselves neglected, that nobody cares, and that actually the whole area falls into decline. So I think a really vital role there emerging for our community safety colleagues led by Rob Hill. In section 223, an abundance of work led by Peter, who's also on the call today, in relation to regulatory services. There's quite a few updates there just to point out on in relation to our registration service, births, deaths and marriages. Significant impacts and disruptions, and I know this committee has held a very close eye on those disruptions during the pandemic. But we are now, we've had the roadmap published by government, we are beginning to get real clarity on the reopening of services, and with that in sight, Peter and his team have embarked on a process of recruiting additional officers to ensure that any backlog could be dealt with swiftly. So that people aren't waiting unnecessarily to rebook their celebratory events as well as other appointments. And we're also working now with approved venues, which are vital to the registration service offer to our citizens. So a lot of people choose to have their celebration events within the registry offices, but many, of course, choose to go to one of 70 or so approved venues, hotels and other wedding venues across the county. And it's really vital that we come alongside those venues to form a really good offer to help couples celebrate, to make the day really special, and to support those venues from a business and economic point of view as well. So really now starting to work with those venues to support them recover from the pandemic. There's also reference in that section to the coroner's service. Similar to the registration service, Peter and his team have successfully recruited a significant number of assistant coroners to help with any backlog that emerges once the inquest process can fully open again. We've been doing really well to keep on top of the building demand, but inevitably there will be a small backlog, and the increased capacity that Peter's managed to recruit just means that we can really get on with helping families deal with that awful situation swiftly once they can, and allow them to themselves move into their own form of recovery. Section 224, Cambridgeshire Skills, is also a service that's been directly impacted significantly by the pandemic, having an inability to teach people face-to-face for some time, but the digital offer is going exceptionally well. Although we're slightly below target in terms of our profile against contract, we're doing far better than the average, as can be seen in section 224.3. There, where we are below profile by about 12%, but in some cases other areas are above 40% below profile. So I think all in all we're doing really, really well. Certainly the Combined Authority, our main commissioner, seem very content, and a real opportunity with that service now going forwards to bend its offer towards the social mobility agenda and help people who find themselves now out of work or struggling financially because of the pandemic to get reskilled quickly and back into employment and seek new opportunities. So a brief run through of the service updates in terms of COVID. Section 2.3, we continue to be right at the forefront of the COVID response. Still incredibly humbling work. Still a year on, we are dealing with significant numbers of people who reach out for support, and are still blessed with some incredible partnerships across our districts and city council colleagues and their hub operations. I just wanted to say a little bit about the clinically extremely vulnerable cohort. Up until recently, you're familiar with that cohort being about 32,000 people. They're the people that have been identified right at the start of the pandemic and during the pandemic as people who are most at risk from harm as a result of catching COVID, clinically extremely vulnerable because of a medical condition. Very recently, and as referred to in the report at 233, government have been doing a lot of work to understand the impacts of COVID on other people who might be impacted through for reasons other than medical reasons. And that research has been concluded and led to a recent announcement that the clinically extremely vulnerable cohort nationally would grow by 1.7 million people. That's 1.7 million more people who are required to shield until currently the end of March. So significantly, probably alarming for those people actually, because they've lived through the pandemic not thinking that they were at a particular risk of COVID, of the consequences of COVID, but suddenly being told that they are. The piece of work, the research that was carried out uses an algorithm based on 4 factors to come to this 1.7 million figure. Those 4 factors briefly relate to age, BMI, the location that somebody lives in, so deprivation being a factor here, and also broader medical history. And when combined, government estimate 1.7 million additional people. We've now had our 2 separate batches of additional residents in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough that are required to shield. It's 234. We said initially there were 10,707 people. That's now significantly higher, about double that number now, and we're now sitting at about 54,000 shielding people across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So a fairly significant jump from the 32,000 people that you're familiar with to the 54,000 that we've now got. Every one of those 54,000 have been contacted both by the national NHS service, but also by the county hub and our district hubs. They've all been given the advice they need to stay safe, to shield, and also given all of the information they need to contact their local hub or the county council's hub. We've stood up arrangements again for food, medicine delivery, practical support, shopping, and so on. Because, as I say, these additional people won't necessarily have those support arrangements in place. And we're managing demand really effectively, no particular risks being identified. At 236 to 238, I know this is something that committee have asked for before. We've provided just there a breakdown of the both the existing CEVs and the newly identified CEVs. This isn't the complete list because this report was published before the extra batch of data came down to us, but just give you a flavour for how the district by district allocation of clinically extremely vulnerable people is looking across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is included for your information. And if any member either in committee or watching wants any more analysis, a deeper analysis for your own divisions or district areas, just reach out to me direct and I'll happily do what I can to provide you with some more information in that regard. 239, clearly the vaccination programme now is a huge focus, but not at the expense of needing people to still follow the rules, to still self-isolate if they're contact traced, to continue to follow the social distancing rules. But vaccination programme itself is a huge part of recovery and return to normality and the opening up of services. And local government now are becoming much more heavily involved in the rollout of the vaccination programme, particularly as we move away from the very high risk cohorts into more of our mainstream society. To that end, we were contacted by the Secretary of State for Health and the Secretary of State for Communities recently setting out 7 key areas of focus for local government to support with the vaccination programme, alongside the CCG, who continue to lead the vaccination programme in each area. Those 7 areas relate to ensuring there is sufficient capacity in terms of getting people to and from the vaccination centre. The vaccination centres themselves are stood up and are operated safely, that there are enough staff and volunteers to run those centres. A priority around communications, making sure that everybody that is due for a vaccine knows that they're due for a vaccine and understand how to get there. The logistics are sorted, so any issues around road closures or road management, for example, are handled. That we prioritise our efforts on ensuring our social care and frontline staff are targeted for vaccination and are identified and brought forward. That beyond cohorts 1 to 9, so that's 50-plus-year-olds and older, as well as clinically vulnerable people. So in other words, the rest of society, that we are really ramping up our efforts to make sure all parts of society are aware, including very vulnerable groups that are isolated or excluded, perhaps groups that don't speak English as their first language, that nobody is missed. That we ensure there is sufficient capacity to deliver to the mass population. So looking at mobile vaccination opportunities, if supported by the CCG, opening up more centres, ensuring that there are enough volunteers to marshal to vaccination centres, and then to move into the seventh priorities around moving into business as usual, because we don't know yet, but are fairly sure that there will be a requirement for an annual booster of some kind, and that will very much need to fall to local government to support. So to help with all of that, we are in the process of developing a single vaccination plan for our county, including all of those themes and primarily focusing on vaccine hesitancy. So making sure that nobody in the county is under any illusion that the vaccines are unsafe. And they are safe, and there are lots of myths and rumours flying around, both nationally and internationally. And we need to make sure that all of our residents know the real facts, whilst respecting the fact that those myths and rumours are out there. And we would like to bring that single vaccine plan to you for your scrutiny and oversight at our next available opportunity. It's a really important part, I think, of local government's role in the pandemic. I'm almost done, Chair. Big report this time. 2311, I just wanted to update on the fact that the Self-Isolation Support Scheme, this is the scheme nationally led, locally delivered, that provides grants of up to £500 for people who find themselves in hardship as a result of needing to self-isolate. That scheme has now been extended to the end of June, and with additional funding. So anybody that you know of that requires support, please ask them to reach out to either their local district or city council or to the county-wide hub. We will do all we can to support them to get that funding. And also another extension of funding that's been announced in recent days is an extension at 2313 to the Winter Support Grant Scheme, very successfully run in Cambridgeshire, supporting thousands of school children and families with food vouchers during the Christmas and February half term, and also about 4,000 families with additional support, clothing, white goods, and so on. An announcement this week that scheme has been extended to the middle of April, with a further £500,000 being made available to Cambridgeshire County Council to distribute. It's literally hot off the press. We're just working closely now with our education director to ensure that we deliver the best solution with that funding, particularly focused on the Easter school holiday period, which is the next big break for families. The final point relates back to the outstanding action at 2316. I'm going to ask Matt, Chair, through you, to now give us an update to close the action down on the work that he's been doing to develop a volunteer strategy. Thank you, Matt.
Yep, thank you. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. So over the last month, we've been working really hard with the CCG on the difficult task of coordinating ad hoc requests for volunteers for vaccination centres. So primarily, this has been to support the primary care networks who have needed very short notice volunteers And these are in non-clinical roles, usually such as meet and greet, car parking, administration support. So in the main, the PCNs are generally quite sufficient, and the numbers have been very, very low that we've been asked to support around this, although slightly in a kind of ad hoc and uncoordinated way, which did create some kind of difficulties at first with lots of different volunteers kind of moving around the system. So the ask has only been between about 10 and 15 volunteers. And to just let members know, the ad hoc nature of the asks are because of the flow of vaccine and where it is and the delivery plan and how it gets moved around the county to support the different centres that need the support for the different types. So obviously, of course, working with the CCG, we were wanted to really get on the front foot and ask them if they could supply us with a clear ask of where those would be. And the simple fact is that they just can't determine in advance where the extra pressures will be. So to combat that, we do have a single route for requests put in place, and that's through the hub. And we also have an agreement with our district colleagues that they'll support any requests that come through PCNs that need support and GP surgeries that need support. And they'll help us to advertise those vacancies that need filling. And then we have a single process back through the CCG and the PCNs to support the volunteer to connect with that GP surgery or that set of PCNs. So as I said, the take up is, or the volunteer requests have been quite low. I think that PCNs have also been supported by Support Cambridgeshire, and we've been working hard with them to be able for them to understand their responsibilities to volunteers. And that's also helped with the fact that PCNs have become quite sustainable in their own right in getting volunteers through. And just to let everybody know that the main centres, the mass vaccination centres, are supported also by the Red Cross and the St John's ambulance through a kind of more formal contracted arrangement, which also means that if you see volunteers at a centre, if you go for your jab, it could be through the Red Cross and through St John's ambulance. So what has become clear though is that we just do need to do more work when it comes to clarity and resilience. A good example is that most recently schools have been asked to undertake testing and have reached out and asked us in the same way as the PCNs did for vaccination centres for volunteers for lateral flow tests in school settings for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So it is clear that we need to be able to have a robust system to be able to reach out to all volunteers as and when we have a challenge globally that we need to meet. So to that end, the County Hub working closely with Support Cambridgeshire, and we're developing a 12-month pilot which will develop a single portal for all things volunteering in Cambridgeshire with an overarching identity. So the name to be determined, but obviously we'll want it to be quite catchy. And with the that will have the ability to be able to reach out when needed through all the individual volunteering channels quickly when the need arises. And we would do this by asking people to sign up to a regular newsletter or vlog, for example, in a kind of union type approach. So although you may be a volunteer for an individual organisation, you'd feel part of a collective whole. You'd receive regular updates, and we'd foster the culture that the network would come together when facing challenges. And that way of working acknowledges that volunteers will be supported by individual organisations in different roles, from long-term, heavily embedded volunteering, right through to ad hoc volunteering, but really creates a movement made up of all volunteers who would want to come together when needed. And also we'd be able to tackle some of the sticky and tricky issues that we have around understanding things like insurances, DBS and expenses, and make that clear throughout the system. So that's the plan, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions if people have them.
Thank you, Matt. So just to start with, once again, Adrian, huge thanks to you and the Hub team for all the work you're doing to support our residents. a very comprehensive package of support. Obviously, we've put in place, but I see one of the recommendations is there anything else we should be considering? So, you know, members, just give that some thought as well, because obviously we want to do all that we're able to do. So we're open to questions on the hub activities, or of course any of the service delivery that was in the first part of Adrian's report. So the first question is Councillor French. Jan.
Thanks, Dave. Very welcome report as normal, Adrian. One thing I'm surprised to hear that you're short of volunteers. When these vaccinations first started, I think it was the middle of January, locally around here was Doddington Minor Unit, and we put a call out for volunteers, and we ended up with over 50. I mean, I've done, I don't know, 20, 25 hours volunteering down there, and it really is an honour to be involved with it. But my understanding, you know, we've got so many volunteers, they don't want us anymore. So, you know, maybe we're just fortunate up here. But a very well written report. Thank you.
I see Matt's indicating. Did you want to come back on that point, Matt?
Yes, sorry, and I must have not done a very good job in my update. I think I was explaining the opposite, that we don't have a shortage of volunteers. We were just asked for a very minimal amount through the hub for volunteers, which indicates that most of those places are already really well supported through volunteers, and we don't really need to get too involved in that. So sorry for any confusion around that.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Jan. Councillor Batchelor, Henry.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, as Councillor French said, excellent update as usual, Adrian. Very thorough, and you know, everyone appreciates the effort you and your team have been putting in. I had a question for you, Adrian, around service delivery. Obviously, relatively recently, the government announced their sort of plan for relaxing the lockdown rules. I just wondered what your thoughts were around that timeline, and if you saw any challenges in that timeline to service delivery. Yeah, just more of your opinion, really, rather than a specific question about the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Batchelor. Yeah, that's an excellent question, and is exercising my and other people's minds at the moment. And the context here really is that the rates of the pandemic across Cambridgeshire differ quite starkly in different parts of our county. So in the south of the county, rates are very low and continue to be fairly stable. In the north, they are much higher, and it's published data, and nationally, Fenland, for example, has been in the top 5 most prolific areas for transmission, alongside Peterborough, now South Holland, although not in Cambridgeshire. A lot of people travelling into South Holland, out of Peterborough for work, and then back into our county again. So we've got to look at the borders. So I think, so that's the context, and why we're exercised really about the roadmap. I think what it offers is hope, which I think is great from a community's point of view. I think we recognise that a lot of people are absolutely feeling desperate, and you know, aside from the isolation issues, people are just really fed up. But actually, what we saw at the weekend, following the roadmap being published, were some behaviours that were quite concerning. So larger groups of people going to parks. It was great weather. And we just saw, I think, people probably taking the publication of the roadmap as a bit of a signal that they can start to relax. So we are quite anxious. I think also, whilst it's great that schools are going back on March the 8th, that does present a risk. And our Director of Public Health will say very openly that every time a milestone in the roadmap happens, it's likely there'll be an impact on the R rate. So we do need to ensure we stay on guard, and why we're very concerned. Concerned is probably too strong a word. While we're anxious to make sure that the roadmap is delivered well in Cambridgeshire. Fortunately, the assessment at each stage will be based on the epidemiology, and so what the dates that are published are the earliest date by which each stage of reopenings can happen. From a service point of view, we are gearing ourselves up for reopening to be ready on the day of permission to operate services, to relaunch those services in much the way we did from the end of the first lockdown. We were one of a small number of registration authorities, for example, that managed to clear its birth registration backlog within a few days, relatively speaking, compared to weeks in some cases. So I feel from our own service point of view, really confident that we will be good to go on each and every milestone. But I think the more concerning factor here is making sure the epidemiology, the rates of transmission continue to fall. And we just need to keep an eye on that and make sure we're doubling down on our efforts as much as we can.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, and good luck. I know we're in very good hands, so all the best.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Henry. So I think there's a message there for all of us to just warn our residents not to relax too soon, because that just threatens the future roadmap, doesn't it? So thanks very much. So Councillor Machini, Elisa.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, Adrian, you have to go through a cycle of how great this report is every time somebody speaks, but it is really a fantastic report, very useful to receive. We would be so much the poorer for information without it. I have a couple of points. I'm very excited to hear of the announcement that we're going to get more winter support grant, which we should probably now rename spring support grant. I don't know. So I was trying to do the numbers in my head, because understandably, I presume this is such new news that it's not in the report. And 500,000 is probably about, I spoke with Councillor, what's his name, from the Children's Committee, Bywater, Simon Bywater. I spoke with him about the cost of the free school meals over the half-term holiday back in October. I don't want to ramble now, but basically what I would like to see is how we're planning to break down that 500,000, what it covers, whether it manages, which I think it does, but I'm not good at doing arithmetic on the hoof. It should cover the free school meals for Easter, plus I don't know how much would be left for the rest of the winter support grant. But I was wondering just how quickly these kind of calculations are going to go to Children's or wherever they're actually supposed to be going, because Children's is in 5 days. It's kind of like, it feels obviously like it's going to be too late if you wait a month. So I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen there, but I'd be quite interested to see it. And also connected to this, I came today with the intention to ask how much we're using this data to inform our work, especially around diversity and poverty, because I think obviously we need data from all over the shop, and this I think is going to be quite, because it's not so much, I don't want us to publish, maps that say lots of poor people here and not many poor people here. I think that would be missing the point. But you do sort of need to cross-reference geography with, well, I want to say class, but also like, other demographic data to actually show you where the trends are, because I think there's rather a lot that we can learn. And without sounding a bit, we kind of have to learn it quite quickly. So I think that would be very useful. And the final point on the, hang on a second, I've lost my point again, 2.3.14, is that it? So we're going to use the libraries to distribute laptops, which I think sounds very nice. I was just wondering how quickly we're doing this and whether there's any progress. And once again, is that going to children? Because I think it's really important to show how quickly we're doing this and how we're responding to sort of, changes in need as they come up and everything. So hopefully that was not too rambly and there were actual questions in there that you can answer, but that was very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. So a few points there for you, Adrian, but we are definitely using the data, aren't we? So, yeah.
Absolutely, we are. Thanks, Councillor Machini. I picked up 3 questions there and wholly agree, actually, with the first 2 points you made. First of all, it literally is hot off the press information about the increased or the extension in the yes, probably to be spring support grant, but whatever it's going to be called. But we are right now doing the calculations to work out how best we can achieve the biggest impact, with a focus on that Easter holiday break. So going back to the basics of the original principles of that grant, which was about supporting families in those sorts of periods who are hardest hit by the pandemic. We're not going to miss the opportunity, either at committee or somehow. We won't wait a month effectively to get this agreed, because we just need to get on with it. And it takes a bit of lead-in time. If we are going to issue vouchers, food vouchers, that takes quite a lot of lead-in time because there's so many thousands to issue. So we need a decision quite quickly. And I've been speaking to our Director of Education today with the analysis of the spend. It's just a slight shame we're not meeting tomorrow instead of today, because we might have had a bit more information, but I'll certainly make sure committee are kept fully briefed. And as before, the decision rests with Children and Young People's Committee, as you know, although our chair, Councillor Criswell, was also jointly responsible for that decision because of the community impacts, and I think we'll follow the same pattern again this time. So be assured we're on it. We just haven't quite done the calculations fully yet. Data, as Councillor Criswell mentioned, absolutely. We've got such now a wealth of information that we didn't have 3 or 4 months ago, and in fact more than we had a year ago as well when the pandemic started, and all of that data. And Matt has recruited, or is in the process of recruiting, the second, but has 2 data specialists working for him in the Cambridgeshire local team, is being evaluated and used to inform not just council business, and it will refine over time, but also our partnership business. Specifically in relation to winter support grant data, though, we are just finalising an evaluation of the programme to date. Again, we'd like to bring that to committee when it's complete, and that will give a full analysis, not just of the 32,000 individual households who have benefited from the vouchers, but the 4,000 families that received other forms of support. Just so we can understand the background to those families, the circumstances that led them to contacting us, what the trends were. For example, one of the things we found was that food wasn't such an issue. Actually, it was more things like clothing and white goods and energy utility costs that were a problem for families. So things like that we already have learned about and will be featuring in the evaluation report, which I'll bring through to committee. And then helpfully, Andrew, right on cue, has put his video camera on, which means he's prepared, I guess, to answer the question on the libraries and laptops, which is already happening and is already very successful. But Chair, through you, if Andrew could perhaps be invited to respond to that point.
Yeah, thank you. Over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say we've had great feedback. I think one NHS trust has donated 200 laptops. We've had more than 150 dropped off at libraries and already in the hands of volunteers who are rebuilding them for the kids. So, and they are pouring in still. And quite surprisingly as well, some of the financial contributions I think have been higher than expected. So we've had really good sort of data dongles and things like that we can get out to families that may have had a laptop but didn't have the broadband to access it. So so far so good.
Really good news. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, Councillor Nieto. Lena.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Adrian, for, like everybody else, you have been doing an incredible job, and we're very grateful to have you and the team. I just wanted to kind of follow up on, all the work that you're doing and kind of moving forward, and maybe we'll touch upon that later on. But I would like to start thinking on how we can connect further with our communities by maybe doing a survey or a consultation and focusing on that recovery. I would like to make sure that residents have a say on how we, what we do for them and what they really need from us. So I was hoping that we can take that forward at some point with all the work that we're doing, recovery plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Lena.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Nieto. I couldn't agree with you more, and now feels like the pivotal moment to do this or start this work as we begin. I mean, we go back to Councillor Batchelor's point about the roadmap, it's starting to give people some hope. They're going to start to think about what whatever life is going to look like beyond lockdown and post-vaccination. And I think it's really dangerous for us to assume that we know how people are feeling. We perhaps could have argued that we had a pretty good view 12 months ago, and we've certainly been in touch with a lot of residents, of course, thousands and thousands during the pandemic. But actually, what is the general feeling of our residents, and how can we exploit our hyper-local approach through Cambridgeshire Local to really drill down into what's going on almost at street level? And we are bleeding a little bit into the next report, but one of the promises that we've made members, and I think is absolutely the right thing to do, is to ensure that any of you knocking on any of your residents' doors can articulate very clearly what we will do for that resident, whether it's an individual or a family, whether they're struggling or not, to improve their outlook, their life, achieve their ambitions, deal with their issues. And I think unless we go out and speak to people, how can we get that right? I also don't want that to be a blanket Cambridgeshire-wide model. It can't be, because we know that people are facing different issues in each of their places. So I think Matt's at work to begin the rollout of Cambridgeshire Local in the place-based events that you're all familiar with is a start, but very quickly on the back of that, if the committee are in agreement, I would strongly suggest that we develop a very detailed but quite creative way of engaging with citizens to find out from them themselves what they're facing, what their issues are, but also what their ambitions and aspirations are and what they might need to help them achieve that. And that might be through surveys, but I think we've also got to get quite creative and think about how we attract that kind of input from people that perhaps traditionally wouldn't engage with us. And that might be through our amazing partnerships that we've formed with our voluntary or faith sector partners, for example, or other agencies. So if committee are minded to agree with that, then again, what we'll do is take that away, build that into our delivery plan, make sure that you are content with the type of approach we're going to take, because it's your residents we'll be engaging with, and make sure that that features as part of our very early implementation stages so that we get it right first time.
Thank you, Adrian. And as we move our services out closer to the people we serve, obviously it makes perfect sense to engage with them and discuss the challenges, and needs and priorities. So yes, I'm sure we all agree. If anybody disagrees, I'm sure they'll say so, but I think that's a given that we would want to support that. I see no one else showing, so before I move to the recommendations, we've got Peter Gell with us. So can I just, there were no questions for you, Peter, but can I just convey our thanks to you and your team for how you've delivered regulatory services over this challenging time and are continuing to do so. So, you know, thank you very much for you and your team as well, because it hasn't been easy, has it? So thank you. Thank you. Okay, members, we'll move to the recommendations. Note and comment on the key themes discussed in the report, and identify and consider further opportunities to provide support for Cambridgeshire's residents affected by the pandemic. So if you're all happy we've done that, members, please show if anybody disagrees with those recommendations. Otherwise, we'll take them as approved. Nobody showing. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Adrian, for that report.
Thank you.
No rest for the wicked, Adrian. It's over to you again, I'm afraid. So item 6 is the improving social mobility report, which of course is a big focus of our minds at the moment. So you again, Adrian. Thank you.
No rest for you either, listening to me again, so apologies. Actually, unlike the previous report, I'm going to be super brief on this one, because most of the committee joined what I found to be an incredibly helpful workshop last month. It was for me one of those milestone moments where it felt like we all got on the same page. We all understood what the definition of social mobility really was. We understood the national picture, and then we brought it down to a local level. We looked at the impact of poverty and deprivation in each of our communities, and realised that actually there are pockets everywhere. And we talked about how good is going to look for residents. We looked at one persona, but there are 16 that we will be sharing with you and are being finalised and will be shared across our organisation. So for me, it really did signal a milestone moment. I hope members agreed. It was a long session, but I think incredibly worthwhile. I've just got 3 things to say, really. That first of all, we are going, this is, as Councillor Criswell said, this is really the most fundamental challenge, I think, that we face. And the committee is leading that work, but it is systemic and it is population-wide. And we've got to really get this right in this next window of opportunity that we've got. And I think if we let it slip away, if we don't tackle social mobility, if we don't deal with people's immediate hardship that might have been generated by the pandemic, I fear that then those people will also become another statistic and inequality will continue to widen. So with that in mind, we are going to have agreed already to bring in some additional capacity. I just wanted to say that to you to give you reassurance that we're not just slotting this into our existing workloads, but actually bringing in a good quality programme manager type role to work with Matt and I to really drive forward the social mobility agenda, develop a really clear plan. We don't want to spend time, as we've said before, developing the theory. I think we're really clear what the theory is. We just want to spend time getting on with how we can help people and help you as members to represent your communities. So that's the first point. I've set myself and speaking to the chief exec and the director of people and communities, set myself a deadline of the end of next week to get that person in. So hopefully that they are out there and we'll find them. The second point is that, and the slides from the workshop are included, but I don't think the pages are numbered, so apologies for that. But I think of all of the slides, for those that weren't at the workshop, the slides that are at pages 64, 65 and 66 of your packs are probably the most important to focus on, because they talk about the features of what our social mobility offer will look like, building on the last year or so of COVID delivery and the work we did prior to that on Think Communities. And particularly on page 68, how it will look and feel. Because I'm aware that a lot of people haven't been able to articulate what Think Communities and now Cambridgeshire Local actually is and what social mobility actually will look like, or tackling social mobility will look like. So they're the slides I would probably focus on, along with the slide on page 68, which is the persona slide, the one we worked through on the day, and I think that does bring things to life. And then finally, one of the recommendations as a result of social mobility becoming front and centre of this committee's business, one of the recommendations is to ask committee to now end the work of the cross-party working group in favour of that work coming to committee in full every meeting. And you'll notice from the agenda plan that Nick's kindly included a social mobility report separate to the service director report at each committee meeting, so that we make sure that focus is maintained. So that, Chair, is all I really wanted to say today about the work we're doing. And as always, very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Adrian. And I think all of those that attended the workshop, I say last month, it was only about 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? But I think we all found that very valuable and has helped set the forward agenda, really. So over to you, members. No, it looks as if everyone's content. Just one thing from me, Adrian. I think one thing that would certainly help me grasp the issues we're dealing with is to understand exactly what help is currently available for struggling families, so that we really understand what gaps we're trying to fill, because I'm not familiar with what can be claimed, what help can be accessed. Sure. So it would just help us say, actually, this is where there's a void, this is where extra help is needed. Just help inform our way forward, I think, would be useful as an early part of that work to help out what our priorities will be and what gaps best to fill.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Nieto, Lena.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian, I think I mentioned it before, but it would be, I would want us to make sure that the councillors or members and others attending the working group that is going to be dismantled, that there will be kind of an opportunity for them to be able to voice or to share ideas regarding this subject, because I think it is really important that this is, of course, you know, cross-party and cross-committee. So I just want to make sure that that's kind of in your process.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. You absolutely have mentioned it before, but it's, I think, now good to get it captured formally in the action log, and we will make sure that we haven't yet contacted those members. It's a working group of this committee, obviously, but there are, you're right, some members on that group that are from other committees. Thinking, for example, the Vice Chair of Children's Young People's Committee sits on that working group as an example. So I will make sure that I reach out to them personally, and we establish a mechanism for ensuring that they continue to engage in this agenda. And I think we probably ought to build in to the member seminar programme some periodic updates on this work, as it does affect every member. And for us, it's so valuable to work, obviously, through members in this context, because you reach the population that we're trying to get to. So I think if we build a bit of a package around communications with members, allowing them to be informed, but also to input, Nick will have captured that as an action, and I'll make sure that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. I think it's fair to say we've got the support of other directors, so this is across the whole organisation, isn't it? So
correct, yeah, absolutely.
This will gradually feed into other agendas, I'm sure. Yeah,
it really will.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Machini, Lisa.
Thank you very much. I mean, obviously, I support everything that's in this. It's been a fantastic workshop. It was extremely useful. It was kind of a bit emotional as well in many ways.
It was.
And you know, it's I absolutely support the fact that we really need to. I hate this word, but we really need to turbocharge this, because it's, you know, we really need to get some skates on in that sense. And it kind of follows a bit from the comment that Steve has made, in the sense that what I really want at this point is something to sink my teeth into, which doesn't have to be complicated, in the sense that, you know, as you've correctly said, we don't need to do massive works of academic disquisition about all of the stuff. You know, from a theoretical point of view, we're over that. But I think we just need a sort of starting point. What does the data tell us? Some proposals, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. And as usual, the big important question: where's the money coming from? You know, how are we organizing delivery? These kinds of things, you know, sort of bread and butter questions. And it starts from what Steve has said. Where do we begin? What's the offer now? What do we want to change? You know, that sort of thing. And I would hope that's not too difficult to put together. I say, and certainly not so much because it's not difficult, but because it should, you know, we should be able to start from something essential and basic, and we can always, you know, enrich later. And I, you know, I really look forward to this becoming a big chunk of our agenda time. And, you know, I measure agenda time in money, because, you know, there's no point talking about stuff you don't spend money on. You don't do anything for our communities. I mean, I say this with some, you know, you don't do anything for our communities if you just talk. You need to do stuff, and doing stuff costs, sadly. So, you know, that's the kind of thing we're going to want to see. And I personally, I can't wait. And I hope that we can become the social mobility group in that sense, because we really got to do stuff. But it's really good, and you know, I look forward to the progress.
Thank you, Councillor Machini. Lots of nods, actually, I noticed, myself included, in a lot of what you were saying. Peter and Matt will probably groan at this point, but we were discussing priorities and resources across our directorate yesterday evening, and one of the top of the list was this concept of creating that very piece of information that both the chair and you have mentioned before PERDA. It's a notional date, but it's a useful date to work to, because actually, you know, we know that campaigning will ramp up from then. You're going to start to engage somehow with residents. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but you know, you're going to be in contact with many more people, and if we can make sure you've got some information available to you during that campaign period, pre-election campaign period, that's for me a good target to aim for. So, unfortunately, Matt and Peter are nodding, so I didn't dream it. That's good. So we've got some work to do, but that basic information plus where we can already bend our own services towards this agenda. Cambridgeshire Skills, for example, is a good example of how we can already say, actually, let's bend some of our provision to some of the localities where we know there's greatest demand. You know, we can put all of that down very, very easily. And you're right, it's not a difficult task, it just needs a bit of time.
And of course, we've got the mobile outreach vehicle coming on stream, hopefully later this month, which can get right into communities and hopefully deliver some meaningful services. So, yeah, some exciting developments to come. Any further points, members, for Adrian? See nobody showing, so we move to the recommendations. Members, note and comment on the key themes discussed in the report. Identify and consider further opportunities to level up communities, and agree to end the Tackling Social Mobility Working Group in favour of the whole committee leading this work. So any dissent, please show, members. Otherwise, I'll take those as approved. Nobody showing. So recommendations approved. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian. So we move on to item 7, which is the Cambridgeshire Libraries Review and Future Priorities. And to present, we have Pat Carrington and Andrew Stoter. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Chair. Thank you. And thank you, committee. Firstly, I'd like to recognise that this paper is actually Gary's paper. Gary and Andrew have put all of the hard work into this, but unfortunately Gary isn't able to present the paper today, so doing it on his behalf, but just like to recognise it's their hard work that's pulled this paper together. Start by giving a background really, and remind members that it was actually back in December 19 when this committee agreed to look at the remodelling of the library service and aligning it to the principles of Think Community. And then in the following October, the committee approved the Open Access Project Plan for the libraries in Cambridgeshire. And it's really sort of building on that work and taking you through what has happened since then. Like everybody else, the pandemic that has taken place has changed our direction slightly in terms of where we're going, but I believe that the libraries have actually been able to play a significant part in the whole process of supporting our local residents and also the wider council services throughout the pandemic period. And so libraries are very much now a key element of the Cambridgeshire local approach, and we're sort of envisaging our services really being at the heart of the community and this work. They're trusted space by local residents, they're seen as safe, and we need to maximise those assets. And listening to the 2 previous items, taking Councillor Nieto's point in terms of engaging with residents, I think what we can do is think about how we can use libraries to support that two-way flow of information and what role we can play in that. And so it's about now sort of tackling that social mobility agenda and looking at how libraries can position themselves to support that work. And again, looking at what was in the previous item and also what took place in the workshop is what is the role libraries can play moving forward. So we have been on that stop-start journey like everybody else. Unfortunately, on the 21st of March, we had to close our library service, and then we were allowed to reopen from July, but obviously in a different model. And we've been on that journey, as other libraries have, throughout this period of time of start looking at what we can do. And I think for us, the really good news was that it has been recognised that libraries now are seen as a key service, and library staff are now viewed as key workers. And I think that really gives the recognition for what libraries have been doing to achieve. So while we've had the hub teams working very much on what do residents need here and now in order to get through this difficult period, libraries working with other partners like Cambridgeshire Skills, as Adrian mentioned, have been able to come and think about the wellbeing aspect, why some of that critical work have taken place. And so in the report, you'll see examples of some of the work that libraries have done, how they've moved themselves and positioned themselves during this time, from it being working with the food banks, whether it be looking at activities that people can do in the home with families and people that may feel isolated, looking at the new website that was developed in partnership with Cambridgeshire Skills that Civic supported us on developing, and also the work that took place with Good Things Foundation, how very quickly the libraries put in a bid and tender for some iPad type devices that people could have at home that didn't have them, which also had digital dongles with them. So it was very much about the service saying, what can we do and what role can we play? When we did open in July, it was very limited, and again continued to look at how we can develop the work that we can take forward to support local people, notably things like the book club with the BBC and Library Presents delivering a digital and outdoor arts event during that time. We then sort of go into November with the lockdown then, and that was the time that we became key workers. But we were still able to look at what essential services we could deliver under the guidance and could deliver safely. And it was things like the Select and Collect still continued, alongside PC access for those local people that needed to apply for jobs or to go onto gov.website. So still ensuring that there was a connectivity there. During that time, also come to the agreement in how Think Communities team can work from libraries. We've also worked with being able to administer and distribute emergency hygiene packs under the Windows support scheme. So you sort of get the feel for the way in which the team very, I think, cleverly have looked to say, what resources have we got and what staff do what skills do our staff have to align themselves to really support the local agenda. And then, of course, we're sort of getting to the here and now and some of the other work that's being taken forward. And so while all of this work has been going on, the team have also been looking at what do we need to do in the future. Obviously, there's the working further on the open access project, and also looking at those 5 pilot sites and getting them ready. Within the future initiatives, we're continuing the work with Civic, and there's been a new focus during this time, I think, where we've been able to maximise the partnership we've had with them has been on that technology side, and they have been able to deliver things quickly for us that we may have struggled to do on our own. In terms of the future planning, we're really looking at building on the strong work that's taken place, and under, I think, Adrian's sort of guidance and the direction that the directorship is now going in terms of the social mobility agenda, we really are looking at how we can play a key role within that and use the 35 libraries, the mobiles, and support the community bus in terms of the offer that we can have. Looking at different ways of working, where the teams are, looking at how we align to the market strategy, market town strategies. So there's a lot of forward planning taking place, and Andrew is leading on some of that at the moment as well. So I think we're really in a unique position with the resources and the skilled staff to help take this agenda forward. And what I'm going to do now is really ask Andrew to share with you and talk you through the data in terms of what literally the impact has been on local people during the past few months. Chair, if it's okay for me to ask Andrew to present that.
Pat. Yes, over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Pat. Yeah, I thought what I'd do is on top of the report, just sort of feedback what it's meant to some of the customers to get these services. So something like the Select and Collect and how we've seen that really boosting people having to teach at home. So parents getting resources from us and really sort of at their wits' end and filling out these forms saying, can you help us with? And we can not only put together the pack of books, but also direct them to online resources, sort of picking up that signposting and helping out people where they're struggling. We sort of tried to be as agile as we can in this period. I think working with the hub, particularly in the early part of the pandemic, about 80% of our team are within the early part of the hub, and that work's really helped the whole team understand the Think Communities agenda, and as we've gone forward it's helped them think how the libraries can do more, and has sort of broken down a few of those barriers between teams and helped us sort of connect a bit better. So things like the Winter Hub and the laptop donations projects have both come out of that, and knowing what buildings are available and what's there. And also just how well residents have responded. So we had the Library at Home service. We have some incredibly vulnerable residents on that, and how much they appreciate just being able to get a hold of books or stories. We have a blind lady who wrote a really lovely message back to us, sort of saying how much it meant to her to suddenly be able to connect. She lost access in April, but we prioritised getting back to her as soon as we could in May. And also within the staff, we spent a lot of time investing in staff training. We have 186 staff, of which many only work maybe 6 hours a week or 12 hours a week. And in the past, training those has been a real challenge. Making use of lockdown to really upskill them, getting their digital confidence up. We've now got people producing content, you know, making YouTube videos who had never even touched a smartphone, and that amongst our staff. And, you know, really engaging staff member who joined Twitter to help support a chat, and then really helped her mental health through lockdown because she engaged in so many other things socially on the platform. So sort of we've had some real benefits within that. There was just a couple of other bits I wanted to pick out. So the work with the BIPC centres, is really picking up a pace. We're going to have 3 new areas developed and designed, but they've been doing some great work with Anglia Ruskin University in this period, providing courses and stuff to help businesses get ready for coming out of lockdown, making sure they're in their best place to pick up any opportunities that come out after that. I think that was everything I had to really, and just simple things like we found the garden at Milton Road Library has access to the Wi-Fi, and having people sat out there using it throughout lockdown, 24 hours a day, it's just been a really nice thing to see, and a really positive way we're supporting people who don't have any other access.
Thank you, Andrew. So can I thank you and your team, Andrew, please, from the committee. Obviously, a lot of great work gone on there. Very good to hear. As you know, we have very ambitious plans for libraries, and as we go through recovery, I'm sure there'll be potential to increase the services that we can put through our libraries and that can libraries can help with. So really gratifying to hear that the team have been upskilling during that time, and I'm sure they'll be raring to go. So thank you very much. So open members, Councillor Costello, Adela.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I just wanted to say that I've worked really closely over the last few months with the libraries, with my particular project, Winter Warmers, and people, the communities find them a safe place to go and visit. We're quite happy to go and drop off items which the library staff collected and then waited for us to get them and distribute them. So those were the 4 main libraries, well, the 4 libraries in our towns in Huntingdonshire. And then the other thing I wanted to say, because I have a lot to do with the libraries, was that they brought, the Library Presents brought a Christmas window to Ramsey, and it was really beautiful. It depicted loads of local artists and scenes, and I think those sorts of things are really good because it presents well to the people, and it gives a warm feeling at a gloomy time of year, and so really, really good. I was involved in a video with the Library Presents staff. So if you want to see it, it's on YouTube.
Thank you, Adela. Councillor Machini, Lisa.
Thank you. This is all very interesting as usual. I had 2 questions. Number 1, I've had some requests about our policy towards library charges. In particular, I'm aware one of my colleagues has been dealing with people asking to be able to borrow books for free if they're on universal credit. And I was wondering if there's any update or anything we can do on that. And second, this all sounds extremely great and I'm very happy about the update. I was just wondering if there are more specific updates about just how well stocked we are and if we need any more resources to, do anything with our stock. Because I kind of lost track of the kind of effect the pandemic has had on sort of that. And if we're happy with the levels of stock that we have, etc. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. But Andrew, there's no charge ordinarily, is it? It's only if they need to be reserved, I think, isn't that correct?
Yeah, so the access to the book stock's free, and the select and collect offer where you're picking from your library is free. What we have had to do, unfortunately, is to reinstate a charge for when books are travelling around the county. And this was simply because we were no longer able to offer a good service. We were getting thousands of requests on a book that was taking, months and months to get there. And that sort of 50p is a small amount, and it just helps us buy in extra stock to meet those sort of specific requests. But the vast majority of books, and if you need most things, it's completely free. So if you just sort of say, it's only if you're really looking for your bestsellers, your hardbacks, something that you really want, that you're paying this 50p for. If you're just looking for, say, advice CVs, etc., anything like that, that service remains completely free. We have been able to put quite a lot of money into our digital stock. We've had some Arts Council funding, and that's allowed us to sort of really hit where we had gaps in the past. That service is now being used much more widely. So where before it was a very specific readership, we're now being able to add a lot more children's content, for instance, comics, children's nonfiction and things like that, which we didn't have before. There was another part of that question that I've already forgotten.
Is that it, Lisa? Anything missed?
No, I think that's fine. I think my colleague's point was more about, I understand that there is in general a need to sort of compensate for the admin costs of, having a book travel around. Somebody has to bring it from A to B and all of that kind of thing. I was just wondering if there was anything we could do to means test that. Because 50p, it sounds low, but it might not necessarily be for everyone. So I was just, I'm not saying the charge shouldn't be there. It's just that, I was hoping we could make some exceptions. And in terms of the stock, the digital, I'm very glad about that. That sounds really good. Do we have similar problems or non-problems, as it were, with our physical stock? Is that also being taken care of?
In terms of expenditure, the only problems we've had is the publishing industry. So the big challenges they faced, a lot of big bestsellers have been cancelled or changed. So we pre-order our books to get the best value, and those delivery dates have changed dramatically. So when you're trying to work within a financial year payment, that's been the only real challenge. So things like travel guides obviously aren't being published at the moment, but also a lot of key books just were delayed or late. So there's been a little bit of challenge getting brand new stock, but that's more around publishing generally than the library specifically.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions or comments, members? See no one showing. Thank you very much, Andrew and Pat, in which case we'll move to the recommendations, members. Agree to continue to use the new libraries model as the key vision for public libraries in Cambridgeshire. Note and comment on the progress made against the previously agreed new model, and consider additional inputs and services can make to support both the Cambridgeshire local delivery and social mobility theme. And obviously that reviewing all those things will be ongoing. So are members happy with those recommendations? If not, please show. Otherwise, we'll take them as accepted. Nobody's showing. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Recommendations approved. So we move on to item 8, which is the finance monitoring report. And hopefully we have Claire Andrews with us. Claire, would you like to present the report? Welcome, thank you.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Claire Andrews here, Senior Finance Business Partner, working in Children's and Communities Finance team. New to this committee, but a couple of decades experience in Cambridgeshire, so hopefully I'll be able to answer anything that you need. So we've got the finance monitoring report to the end of the last completed month that's available, so that's to the end of January. We're showing in the C&P area an expected overspend of 2,180,000, which is just a small reduction from the previous month's position of 2,252,000 overspend. There's just a couple of minor changes within there. There's a slightly increased overspend within registration, which will be because of reduction in fees there, predominantly marriage fees. And there's some slight decreases the other way in Think Communities, coroners and libraries. So obviously it's part of the overall People and Communities report, which is in there in full. I'd just point out that Appendix 2 within there is the notes appendix, and that gives you that bit more detail if there's anything you wanted to look at in more detail. But otherwise, yeah, that's the summary position for the communities and partnerships part of the report summarised there for you under 1.2, page 90 of your agenda pack. So yeah, happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Claire. So just to be clear, obviously that overspend is COVID related, and we'll be drawing down the government funding to make up that deficit.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that. So across the council, so all of the MHCLG, the money that's coming from the MHCLG is being shown as a large underspend, so extra income corporately, with the actual COVID related expenditure being shown within the individual services as overspends. Across the whole council, that will net off. And the other thing similar to that to mention within Think Communities is that the redeployed staff shows as a spend within Think Communities, but there are offsetting underspends within other services across the council where those staff charges have been taken from to put them into the hub as well.
Yes, thank you, Claire. So strange times at the moment means we need to juggle things, doesn't it? But
that's right. Yeah.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. Any questions, members, for Claire on the finances? All fairly self-explanatory, I think we'll agree. Looks if you've done all the explaining, Claire. Thank you very much. No one's showing.
No worries.
So thank you very much, then, members. So we'll just move to the recommendation, review and comment on the report. Are members happy that we've done that? If not, please show. Nobody's showing. So thank you very much, members. Thank you, Claire.
Very welcome.
Thank you. So we move on to item 9, reports from community champions. So do we have any brief updates from community champions? Councillor Costello, have you anything you'd like to update us on?
Thank you very much. Just wanted to go back to the Winter Warmers project because I just wanted to highlight here the generosity from WI, U3A and other knitting groups. We collected somewhere in the region of 1,000 to 1,500 items, which is tremendous. We had 2 weeks where we collected one at the beginning of December, and then we had another one in February. And these items have been distributed amongst our vulnerable people. So, I mean, I just wanted to highlight that work because that was all voluntary work. And again, the libraries helped with collecting. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is that I've met the new place coordinator for Huntingdonshire, and I'm looking forward to working with Sophie and the rest of her team when they get appointed. We'll be looking at taking part. There's 4 engagement meetings being held later this month in Huntingdonshire, and I hope I have a little bit of input into that.
Thank you, Adela. And yes, very good point. Of course, we've got place coordinators and connectors now in place across the Cambridgeshire local areas, and of course, you know, community champions, area champions play a valuable role in liaising with them. So yes, good point, Adela. Thank you very much. Councillor Every, anything you'd like to update us on?
Yes, just a couple of things, Chair. Thank you very much. I sit on the Combined Authority Skills Committee along with my colleague, Councillor Seaton from Fenland. And we've been doing some work alongside the Combined Authority and all the stakeholders who are involved in the skills agenda. And we're currently in dialogue, Councillor Seaton and myself, with the Combined Authority to set up district sort of skill networking forum so that we can get all the right people around the table for the skills agenda. It's not going to be a talking shop, it's going to be a facilitating operation, but working very much alongside with the structures that we have. A particular focus is concerns that we're having perhaps for our youngsters who will come into the workplace, and we'll be fighting with others who have been employed and become redundant. Also who will have the employability skills that our youngsters don't have, and there will be some competition, I think, in terms of achieving work. This is not going to happen straight away, but it's something that we just need to look at in the future, and also to grow our offer, particularly with the opportunities area for our apprenticeships, working with our local businesses. I think that's just something which we're working with adult skills, obviously, and all of that to get everybody around the table, quite specifically for the opportunities area of East Cambs and Fenland. And I'm sorry, Councillor French, I hadn't had an opportunity to tell you that. So, but if you would like to know more about it, I'm really happy to talk to you outside the meeting. And just to say that we have had our two Cambridgeshire local events. The last one was yesterday, really successful, went down incredibly well. Really good platform for a start. Just want to say a huge thank you to our place-based coordinator Wendy and our connectors Colleen and Chris, who put on a really, really good show. It really, really worked well. Good platform for showcasing all our local communities and their organisations, and I think we're all working, looking forward in the right way, and it's a really good start for total collaboration, particularly working with what Matt was saying in terms of growing the volunteers and keeping them together and not robbing Peter to pay Paul, and making sure that it's bottom up and so on. It was really good, but those three worked incredibly hard, so I just wanted to make sure that our thanks were registered. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And I know some of the learning from those early sessions in East Cambs are being, shared with the team for the rollouts elsewhere. So that's really appreciated. Thank you. Councillor French, any update from Fenland you'd like to?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that, Liz. We have our first event tonight, so I'm looking forward to seeing the outcome of that. Yeah, still in lockdown, but managed to be, I don't know, exceptionally busy, busier than, I just can't believe it. I have been working with FACT and a company called PIC, who have donated a fridge to FACT. So the whole point is to get people to eat fresh produce. It was launched, I think it was Monday it was launched. They're going to be open 2 days a week for a couple of hours to see how it's not a food bank. It's actually, MD can, they have to make an appointment and go in there. I'm sure it'll be in the local papers soon. So that was quite an exciting one. I'm working with, they're not quite an organisation, but they're getting there. Fenland Family and Baby Bank. They started off a few months ago, started off the wrong way, but we're trying to get them on the right track. And as soon as they get themselves organised, hopefully they'll get some grant money for this. Kerry Tonk is heavily involved with it. I had a meeting with her yesterday, so we're hoping to get that sorted. Yeah, I had another meeting last night with the chaps who want to set up a new BMX track in March. Again, Terry Tonk is involved in that, and also Adam Garford with his sports background. It was interesting to see what he had to say last night as well. So I do look forward to working with Adam. I think he's going to be a great asset. Of course, his dad was with Fenland for over 40 years. Yeah, so tonight we've got that. And the other thing that we've been working with since December, which is quite sad really, the amount of places across Fenland that have been flooded. I've attended many meetings with County Council officers, Anglia Water, all brought together, and there's a lot of hard work being done there. One of the places that was also hit hard was Tid St Giles. Why that was hit so bad, I don't know. Or didn't know at the time. We had tankers out, County Council got tankers out there at midnight just before New Year. The problem now thankfully has been resolved, North Level have put a new culvert in the road, which takes all the water away. And I think that's not quite where you are, Adrian, but that's near your place. So you probably know a bit more about it. I didn't realise until I read up on the internet, it's one of the lowest lying places in the whole country. But there you go. Yeah, lots to do. County officers, highway officers are working exceptionally hard to try to resolve these flooding issues. And as you know, that in the budget there was additional money put forward for that, and we're also applying to government to see if we can get some more money. Always want money. So that's about it at the moment.
Thank you, Jan. Nobody will argue with us saying always wanting more money. No. Elisa, anything?
Thank you,
update from City?
Unfortunately, not since we last met as community champions. I've still got that meeting set up for next week, which I'm really looking forward to now. And I hope I will be able to give a comprehensive update about Cambridgeshire Local and Cambridge City as soon as possible after that.
Good. Thank you, Elisa. So any questions, members, for our community champions? No, good. Thank you very much indeed. So thank you, members. So we move on to the last item, item 10, which is the agenda plan. Adrian, anything to update us on the agenda plan, please?
No, Chair. As published, just to note that there is no formal meeting scheduled for April. Would quite like to ask members just to hold the date for a few days whilst the Chair and I discuss whether or not we convert some of that time over to workshop, but no scheduled meeting for April. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. I think it would be good to keep the date free.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on, so we might have things to work through, but no formal agenda items at the moment. So thank you very much, members. Thank you all for attending, members and officers, and thank you to those watching online. I'll now draw the meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.